Welcome, everyone. I have the distinct honor and privilege to interview JP Cortez, who is the executive director of the Sound Money Defense League. They are an organization working to remonetize gold and silver through nationwide legislative efforts. He's a graduate of Auburn University and a resident of Charlotte, North Carolina. JP is the lead author of the Sound Money Index, and you can follow him over on X at JP Cortez 27. And JP, one thing I've been doing on this channel for quite a long time, probably been the most consistent in discussing matters with what I call the revolution for sound money. And I see you as the biggest threat to the Federal Reserve. Welcome, JP.
Thank you very much for having me on, Sal. I've seen your episode before. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you, sir. It's an honor that you are here. And I guess I want to start with what got you started in this effort. And let's talk a little bit about how this came to be. And then we're going to take a step backwards after you answer that question.
My background is like that of many others. It all started with Ron Paul for me. I was in high school when I first discovered Ron Paul. By chance, I was randomly assigned a politician to research for a project in school. And from there, I fell down the rabbit hole and I started studying Austrian economics. I went to Auburn University, like you mentioned, and that is across the street from the Mises Institute, which is the world's leading Austrian economics think tank. And that's where I learned, and this is, Ron Paul is very closely affiliated with the Institute. And that's where I learned about sound money, the importance of an honest money, how a money can restrain a government that would otherwise grow. And so my background then coming out of studying political science and economics at the Mises Institute, I teamed up with Money Metals Exchange, a national online bullion dealer, to start a policy group. We realized that there are a lot of impediments and disincentives standing in the way to people using, buying, and selling gold and silver. If people want to use this as money, there are taxes, there are regulations, all of these things designed to stand in the way of us using constitutional money as money. So we go state to state and to Washington, D.C., removing these taxes, removing these impediments to make it easier for people to adopt their own gold standard.
It seems like this has all started in Utah back in 2011.
That's exactly right. They were the pioneers on this. In 2011, they passed what is called the Utah Legal Tender Act. At the time, I was still in high school, but just a couple of years later, 2014 is when the Sound Money Defense League started. And before this, there was really no national organized effort to promote these legislative projects. Obviously, the Utah was the leader on this issue, but starting in 2014, so more than 10 years ago when the Sound Money Defense League got involved, we've since then passed or worked on more than 30 successful legislative projects across the country, ranging from Louisiana to Wyoming to Idaho to Kentucky to most recently Alabama. So it has been a very productive 11 years now for the purpose, for the fight for sound money at the state level, and at the federal level, we've seen some progress as well.
It is amazing. I have seen some federal legislation being introduced by Alex Mooney, Mike Lee, the most recent, to get rid of the Federal Reserve and to go back to a gold standard. So it is nice to see it on multiple fronts. But what's fascinating is this state effort. I think that's so important because, we are the United States of America. And the key here being states. And states really can implement that Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, which says that nothing but gold and silver shall be used as money. And what I have on the screen here on my side is versions of constitutional money, what's known as pre-33 gold and constitutional silver in the form of the $50 there. And I usually like to show those when I do my news reports on what you do with the Sound Money Defense League and the legislation that is passed that they are or makes progress through. Because for most of our history, we have used gold and silver as money. It's really only since 1965 that we stopped using silver, and gold has circulated through to 1933. That's why we call it pre-33 gold. And then it was made illegal to own except for 5 of these coins, or $100 worth of gold at the time. But once it was made legal again in 1974, 1975, well, it never circulated as money again. But there's been no challenges by any federal body for what you're doing in these states, because they know that the Constitution is clear that gold and silver are money as defined by the Constitution and codified into law on April 2nd, 1792, with the weight and to the denomination of gold and silver. So I think that's profound. You've got a solid foundation here, and it's amazing what you're doing. And so it started with Utah, then it spread like wildfire, like you were saying. And for the last few years here, we've really seen it pick up pretty dramatically, haven't we?
We absolutely have. And, like you mentioned, we understand that the monetary dysfunction that we're seeing today stems from the federal level. This is a result of federal mismanagement at the federal level, the federal branch, and also the Federal Reserve. And so while the dysfunction stems from there are things that states can do to mitigate some of this damage. And that's what states have been doing. So like you mentioned, last year, 2024, was our 10-year anniversary and our most legislatively successful year in our history, where more than 65 measures were introduced across more than 26 states. And the Sound Money Defense League was the primary driver behind 7 successful projects, 7 states that removed sales tax on precious metals, removed capital gains tax on precious metals, and did a variety of other things. So building off of that, coming into 2025, we knew we had a great momentum, and that has played out. Starting with Wyoming earlier this year, that passed Senate File 96, so Senator Bob Ide, to establish a $10 million gold reserve, a physical gold reserve for the state of Wyoming, to have the state of Wyoming invest in physical gold on their state balance sheet. Next was Idaho, who passed their largest state budget, or their largest state tax cut in state history, $240 million that they cut. And among those cuts was a cut on capital gains taxes on gold and silver. So now in Idaho, when you sell gold and silver, if you enjoy a gain, the state is not going to charge you that tax. They also reaffirmed gold and silver as legal tender. That's a symbolic victory showing that the state of Idaho reaffirms and aligns with the constitutional mandate, like you mentioned in Article 1, Section 10, that no state shall make anything but gold and silver a tender in the payment of debts. Next was Kentucky, which, Sal, I noticed that you did a great video on this. I encourage everyone to go check it out, because the drama in Kentucky is worthy of that of a made-for-TV movie. There was last year, when we originally passed a sales tax exemption on purchases of gold and silver coins, bars, and rounds, we passed it overwhelmingly with support in the House and the Senate in Kentucky when it reached Democratic Governor Andy Beshear, and he vetoed the bill, sneering that if you can afford to buy gold, if you can afford to save in gold, then you can afford to pay taxes. The governor took this stance, and immediately legislators in Kentucky that were in favor of sound money acted, and we introduced a bill this year that not only retroactively removed the tax from purchases of gold and silver dating back to 2024 when we originally passed the exemption, it also introduced stiff penalties, enticing taxpayers in Kentucky to sue Governor Beshear and his departments for wrongful taxation on purchases of gold and silver. Within hours of that bill passing the legislature, and then, of course, being vetoed again by Governor Beshear, the legislature overrode the veto, and instantly Money Metals Exchange and multiple people from the state joined together to sue the governor for wrongful taxation for these penalties. So even in Kentucky as well, so that's 4. That would be our 4th legislative win, capping off with what happened last week in Alabama, another issue that you covered with Governor Kay Ivey in Alabama, reaffirming gold and silver as legal tender. This is, again, a symbolic victory. Alabama last year eliminated capital gains tax on their gold and silver, and then in 2018, we worked to eliminate sales tax on gold and silver. So the friction on both sides of the transaction at the state level is completely gone. The federal capital gains still exists. The tax still exists, of course. But like you mentioned earlier, we're working with Mooney to eliminate it on the federal level as well. So we've seen this excellent progress, standing the issues, the briar, all of the thicket standing in the way of people transacting in gold and silver. all of that's being cleared out. And we're seeing, obviously you've seen a bunch of talk about central banks all around the world stockpiling gold and silver. There's evidence now states themselves are stockpiling gold and silver. And of course, individuals are also stockpiling gold and silver. More and more people are adopting their own gold standard, de-dollarizing to try to immunate them, to try to protect themselves from the risk of inflation that is imminent here, but with actions by the Federal Reserve and at the federal level.
And the thing about gold and silver is understanding its timeless effect on all of us. It is a store of value, regardless of what the Constitution says, regardless of what any entity says. It's been recognized throughout history, and the Dutch thousands of years. And so I always tell folks, just as a Dutch central bank mentions gold as an anchor of trust, we ourselves can be our own central bank, because we know that gold is trustworthy, and silver as well. And time and history is on our side. But it is encouraging and exciting to see that your efforts as a general in the Revolution for Sound Money, fighting back against places like like Governor of Kentucky, or what we saw in New Jersey as well. Finally, in New Jersey of all places, who knows, maybe New York and California are on the table. And so it's encouraging. It's really neat to see. And so this just makes it all the better and validates what we have been saying in this community, and places like the Mises Institute and Ron Paul and others that recognize history have been saying. So now you've got us up to date with what's going on with your efforts. What is the future like now for future legislative efforts in other states? Anything that you can share with us?
We're still in the thick of the 2025 season, so there is still laws passing here imminently over the next couple of weeks. Just earlier this week, I was in Nashville testifying in favor of Tennessee becoming the next state to establish a physical gold reserve. They're considering about a $65 million investment in physical gold there. Iowa is considering eliminating their state capital gains tax on gold and silver. Alaska is considering eliminating their local sales tax. Alaska is one of the 5 states in the nation that does not have a state sales tax, but their localities, municipalities can impose sales tax. So we're in the process of ensuring that even local governments do not impose tax on gold and silver. And so there are a number of other projects as well moving down the pipe. And it's very promising to see, like you said, because America is in the throes of a monetary renaissance. More than ever before, we're waking up, and modern day, just average Americans are asking themselves questions like, wait, why doesn't my money buy as much as it used to? And of course, the government has pivoted over and over. Just recently, the most recent bout of pivots over the last couple of years, everything from there is no inflation to inflation is transitory to inflation is the fault of Russian oligarchs to inflation is the fault of your local grocery store CEO to so on and so forth. There's always an excuse.
The latest is now tariffs equals inflation.
Of course. Most recently now tariffs. There's always an excuse because the government's inability to look inward and see that they are indeed the cause, the primary impetus of this monetary dysfunction. So restoring value or restoring confidence in the dollar would be so important, and linking it back to gold would be such an obvious way to do that. One of the ways that we're working on the federal level is we're working on a bill to audit America's gold. You may have seen news about this. There was buzz recently. Elon Musk, President Trump himself tweeted about this and has talked about it in interviews. So there's a big push now to open the vault doors at Fort Knox and the other places where America's gold reserves are purportedly stored, and to inject confidence back into the dollar. What greater confidence, what greater sign of confidence would there be to say, yes, all of the ounces are here. The greatest monetary asset the world has ever seen is stored safely in American vaults and owned by Americans. But we don't know that that's the case because there hasn't been a comprehensive or legitimate audit for decades. So we've worked closely with Congress people, and we're hoping that federal legislation will be introduced soon that would call for a gold audit. This is building, like I mentioned earlier, on the work of Ron Paul, who many decades ago introduced legislation on this. And then Congressman Mooney, we worked in 2019 and 2021. And recently, we've improved the legislation. So this new legislation, any new legislation on this issue, should of course include a full inventory of the gold and silver, or the gold stored in American vaults. It should also include a full assay. So we don't want a live stream like Elon Musk has suggested. We don't want the dog and pony show that they did in the 70s, where they brought in cameras and a couple of Congress people showed them some pre-approved bars and then went on their way. We're looking for a full assay and inventory. And on top of that, we want a full accounting of all of the transactions that America's gold has been involved in for decades. You know, there's a lot of talk, and there's legitimate talks, legitimate questions about who owns the gold in American vaults. If it is indeed there, has it been swapped? Has it been leased? Is it encumbered in any way? Is it otherwise entangled in financial transactions with Germany, with the Saudis, with Middle Eastern countries, with the Vatican? There are so many legitimate questions, in part because the government has been so shady. There have been reports about opening compartments, opening seals. There has been reports about moving gold in ways that haven't been recorded, in ways that a private depository would never be allowed to get away with. So all of this leads to what needs to be a congressional act to examine and ensure that America's gold is indeed there. And we hope that here in the next couple of weeks, there will be legislation introduced calling to do just that.
Well, there is annual audits of and I've seen them. The Treasury Department has issued those, but they're very, very vague, extremely vague.
Those audits are for the seals.
Right.
They look at the seals and they say, okay, this seal is still here. But an audit is not an audit. A real audit at a private depository, for example, would audit the metals inside the box. And audits are ongoing. You can't audit something once and then be done with it. And that just some of the questionable practices around some of these audits are what lend questions and lend credibilities to quote unquote conspiracy theorists. So, America has done a bad job. The stewards of America's money have done a very poor job of instilling confidence in the dollar, of course, of having the dollar hold value since it was disattached from gold. And so restoring gold, be that at the state level, at the federal level, would be a way to strengthen the dollar, to restore confidence in the dollar, and to make sure that the dollar continues as the most powerful global reserve currency.
Exactly right. And actually, Rand Paul sent a letter to Secretary Scott Bessent basically ordering that very thing. He was supposed to get back with him on March the 19th, but I've not heard anything about that. We've not heard anything more about this dog and pony show. I'm for both. Show us the gold, take us on a live stream tour, but also a full audit, just as you mentioned. I think that should be done. And I do think legislation should be written so that it could be done every 5 years or what have you. I mean, I totally agree with that. And of course, I can't stress enough, it's not even so much to legitimize that the gold is actually there, but that we actually own it. It's not leased out, because with this legislation that the senator from Wyoming wants to revalue gold and take that money and put it towards Bitcoin, which I think is a bad idea.
Right. And so you have these crazy ideas. You're talking about, whispers about remonetizing America's balance sheet. And you have Senator Lummis in Wyoming talking about revaluing the gold and then using the proceeds to buy Bitcoin or other crypto assets. All of those ideas aside, before any of that can happen, a legitimate comprehensive audit must take place. That has to be the first step.
There also needs to be a law in Congress that before you become a Congress member, you should attend this institution.
The Mises Institute. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Got that at my local coin shop the other day. This is the first time I'm showing it on the channel.
That's fantastic. I have a Mises round just like that. It might be a different one, but I have one with Mises's face on it. That's a beautiful round, and that you picked it up at your local coin shop is really fantastic.
It kind of looks like Milton Berle and Mel Brooks combined. At least on that round he does, but notwithstanding. All right. I'm sure he's probably a comedian, but I don't know. Anyways, all right. Very good. Well, nice. That's It's just amazing what you do. And one of the things I find pretty impressive about the Sound Money Defense League is the Sound Money Index. And you rate all of the states and where they are on the Sound Money Index. Can you explain a little bit about what that is and how you measure? Because it's pretty in depth.
Absolutely. So the Sound Money Index is the nation's preeminent benchmark for sound money policies. We rank all 50 states since 2018. We created criteria that rank all 50 states based on their pro or anti sound money policies. So over the years, it's been fascinating watching states move up and down the rankings. Towards the top are states like Utah, like Wyoming, South Dakota. These are states with generally low levels of taxation, states that have been proactive in removing taxes on gold and silver, establishing bullion depositories, investing state funds in gold, which several states have done. And then towards the bottom, unsurprisingly, these are states with generally high levels of taxation, states that still impose a sales tax when you buy gold and silver at your local coin shop or online, that still charge a capital gains tax when you sell your precious metals if you have a gain. So these are states that haven't moved at all on precious metals. These are states like New Mexico, Maine, Vermont, that are generally, like I mentioned, high levels of taxation. In many of those states, we have legislation this year to eliminate the sales tax or to take first steps towards getting that ranking up. So even the low states, the states that are not currently performing well on the index, are actively seeking to move up. I encourage everyone to find the index. I'm happy to link it, to share the link on the website. And you can find where your state ranks. If you're in one of these states that has a low score, please feel free to contact me, reach out, and we'll make sure that sound money policies get introduced and hopefully passed in your state.
Well, JP Cortez, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and sharing with us what's going on with the Sound Money Defense League and the revolution for sound money. And with that being said, I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each one of you for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.